Good morning, everyone. So we'll be starting. Thank you for joining us in our fourth NGN Majlis. The topic of today is robotic process automation. Actually, we've got quite a bit of requests on the topic, so we've decided to have a little detour from cybersecurity and to tackle the topic, to answer, I would say, some of the top questions that are going through the attendees' minds, and definitely, hopefully, to, I would say, have a little bit of knowledge transfer on how to kickstart the process of automation and a digital workforce. Before I dive into the agenda, I would like to share a little bit about our panelists and speakers today, and thank them definitely for participating. With us today, one second, is Mr. Paul Marshall, who is the Partner Solutions Consultant and our partner from Blue Prism. We also have Mr. Mohammed Bouchiri with us, Head of Infrastructure at Bank of Bahrain and Kuwait. And last but not least, Mr. Hussein Sabt, Senior IT Manager at... sorry, one sec. Can everyone hear me first? Yes. So Mr. Hussein Sabt, IT Senior Manager at Solidarity Insurance Bahrain. So thank you all for joining us today, and I'm sure you have very interesting discussion for us. So Mr. Paul is gonna basically give us an intro on robotic process automation, more of the solution, and then we will talk to Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Hussein, who are gonna give us the local experience and their, I would say, recommendations and their insight into the process here in Bahrain and regionally. Also, they'll give us some industry-specific use cases that they have implemented or are in the process of implementing when it comes to the banking and financial services. For a quick intro, we'll start with a quick intro from Mr. Yaqub Al-Awabi, our CEO. And from Mr. Paul. I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Paul, for a quick welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
All is good.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today with NGN Majlis. It's always nice to have the opportunity to talk to a group of interested people about the future of the way that work is going to be done. We call that RPA, we call that automation, but I'm very happy to be here with some esteemed colleagues as well that will tell you their practical experience of how they've also automated in their own businesses. So we're going to look at the theory, and we're going to look at the practice as well. So it should make for an interesting session. So thanks for tuning in.
For a quick welcome, also, Mr. Yaqub, the floor is yours.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. So I'd like to thank Mohammed Bouchiri for investing time with us today. Similarly, Hussein Sabt and Paul as well, our partner in this event. And nevertheless, as you all know, the importance of robotic process automation. Today we have a lot of subject matter experts. I don't want to deep dive into the matter itself. However, I think Kingdom of Bahrain has done major steps, towards the infrastructure, towards the technology. And if you look at the internet penetration in Bahrain, it's probably one of the highest. We have a 98% internet penetration. And the great evidence of the technology and investment was during COVID. Bahrain did, I would say, a swift digital transformation from the government side and the public sector. And RPA is, in my opinion, the latest step for a technology towards I would say, bringing more speciality to individuals, to peoples, and any routine jobs or jobs that are I would say occupied by people can be done and efficiently done by them, whereas people can be I think we can increase their skill set, create more creativity, or create more jobs who are that they can manage with. And within NGN, our main I think focus is to build a skill set of people, to bring more technology, more creative stuff for them to be involved in. However, the topic is more interesting, and the topic I think of our subject matters experts are wide. So the good thing about today, we have industry experts from the banking and finance, especially both Mohammed will talk about his experience in the banking and finance, and Hussein will talk about the insurance and overall. So it's very exciting to hear about success stories. And Paul obviously will cover a wider area and what is happening with the technology in RPA. So I wish everybody a good success, and thank you for joining and investing time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yaqub. So we will dive right into the first topic with Mr. Paul telling us basically in simple words, what is robotic process automation? What's the digital workforce? Because quite frankly, when everyone hears the word robotic process automation, they're expecting to see a physical robot present in the office. So we're here to tackle that myth. Before we start, we'd like to just have a more interactive session with the audience. So first of all, audience, also thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions in between, you can put them in the text. We'll keep a log of them, and then maybe perhaps we can have a quick discussion in the middle of the event. And also we will have an NGN Majlis chat towards the end. Also in between, we'll be having a few poll questions just to take, I would say, your feedback and get an idea about your opinion so that we can be more involved and more interactive. Before we start with Mr. Paul, we'd like to give a few minutes for everyone just to give us a little bit more insight about their own organizations and the adoption of automation tools. So if you don't mind answering the question, have your organization implemented any automation tools? Paul, did your organization invest in any automation tools?
Absolutely have our own internal center of excellence, of course.
Great.
All of our pay slips are created by robots.
I sure hope so.
Yes, Ismail, in our case as well, we have implemented few automations in the organization Solidarity, and we are also in the process of automating a couple of processes as well, which I'm going to talk about during my session.
Quite frankly, Mr. Hussein, thank you for mentioning this, is that even for the end user or your customer, for example, who's, let's say, is buying a service from you, whether it's an insurance policy or whether the case of a bank has an account with you, I think automation also has a positive impact at customer level, not just internally as an organization.
Definitely, if you think about it as a full cycle, it starts with the customer, it ends at the back office. So which part you automate is at the end is gonna impact the customer experience. It's gonna impact even the efficiency of the services we provide.
Great. We can't wait to hear more about your experience. Now, Mr. Paul, the floor is yours. Run us through those robots.
Yeah, thank you. So can I get my slides? Is it possible to?
Sure.
Let me just...
They are live.
Yeah, there we go. So if I click this is sharing. Okay, so the view that we're going to take on this then is this idea of automation in the data-driven enterprise. Very often what robots really are doing is moving data between different business systems, often what we call systems of record. Sometimes we call them legacy systems in some cases. But the idea of robots is they're generally moving data around your existing business systems. Is this advancing? If I click on next slide, is it advancing for everybody? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing with automation is this idea of vision for automation. So what is an automation project not? An automation project is not if somebody says, I want to automate accounts payable or I want to automate accounts receivable. Really what that is that's a task-oriented quick fix for a particular set of people in a particular department. That in itself doesn't really transform the way in which a business works. You're generally addressing a small problem. When you look at automation, it's actually a subset of a broader digital transformation. So you have to have a vision that goes with that. And that vision has to be supported by senior executives because you're basically going to change the way work gets done in this business. And that's quite a profound thing to do. So very often we have this idea that within automation projects, we're looking at a digital workforce for every enterprise. So each organization should look inside and look at how work gets done today and say, we're going to change how work gets done. traditionally were using, internal staff. Maybe we did some business process outsource, but there's now this third way of work. And this is the idea of the digital workforce having an impact inside the organization. But moreover, the idea of a digital transformation with automation is not to replace all the people with robots, because of your people are your human capital. They have bright ideas. They know your business. They maintain your relationships with customers and suppliers, and all those kinds of good things, as in work for people. So the idea really is to take the robot out of the human, take the rote work, the repetitive work away from people, so people can do what people are really good at, which is, innovate, add value, and bring human sentiment to business problems and the way that we run our businesses. So this idea of digital workforce for every enterprise, yes, in collaboration with humans doing what humans do really well. And there's lots of reasons why people do this. Sometimes it's to improve KPI within a particular business unit, accuracy, save money, save time, all of these good things. But at the highest level, what we're really doing is widening the jaws between the expense line and the income line of the business. So as businesses enter ever new markets, they create new products and services, they try to serve their customers better, they have better customer centricity, you're really looking to increase the income line. But what you don't want to do is increase the expense line along with it. And so if you use digital workforce as a strategic capability within an organization, we can suppress the expenses. We can manage the payroll, we can manage third-party licensing costs and all those things that tend to creep in as our business grows. We can keep that suppressed, but we can increase the income line at a greater rate, and therefore we're kind of widening the jaws between those two dimensions. And if the automation project is seen to be contributing to that, then it continues to get budget and it becomes a self-sustaining initiative within the organization. So that really is what you need to have on the inside if you're going to do automation as part of digital transformation. I take it back to the first thing I said. If the only thing you want to do is automate accounts payable or invoice processing, you're not going to move the needle on the difference between income expenses. It's just not a big enough vision. So vision is probably the number one ingredient to making digital transformation with automation work. So then if we look at what does digital workforce enable in an organization, why would you do this? What does it matter to different people? Well, the obvious one is this idea of the increase in productivity. So any business process that I choose to automate, if I move it onto the automation platform, that business process can now be executed 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, at any scale, on demand or by a schedule. There's no human workforce really that can compete with that level of business process execution agility. So this idea of bringing in a digital workforce to increase productivity is kind of the number one obvious reason why people adopt digital workforce within the enterprise. But then there's also this idea of accelerated innovation cycles, the ability to create new products and services. So all organizations have an IT landscape made of ERP systems and budgeting and planning and CRM systems, but they are generally quite disconnected. Maybe they've been integrated with with some system integration at some point in time, but the systems were never really created to work together. They exist somewhat in splendid isolation. Once you have robots in the business, robots can connect anything to anything at any point in time. So as an example, if you wanted to connect a chatbot workflow into a core banking system, if you wanted to do that, a digital worker will quite happily sit between core banking and chatbot. Chatbot will gauge the intent of the customer. The digital worker will go into core banking to execute the intent and then report back to the chatbot that the job was done. Now, core banking systems don't by default have chatbot capabilities to talk to end users. That's not the point. But actually, when you add something like chatbot, core banking, and digital worker into a solution, now the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So when you start to think about that and the way that you can connect all these different technologies together, and you can do that with robots or digital workforce basically being the glue, now you get this idea of accelerated innovation cycles. You can also get operational transformation internally. So generally, within most organizations, there are some number of teams, and generally the number of people in those teams scales with the number of business processes they have to execute or the number of transactions. And whether it's kind of level 1 work, level 2, level 3, we simply add more and more and more people into those teams as the business grows and as the complexity increases. The reality is an awful lot of the level 1 work across all of these different teams can and probably should be done by robots. And therefore there's the ability to transform operationally how many people you have in teams and how those teams are structured, and even where those teams are structured geographically and temporally with time. So when you start to take away the repetitive robotic work that people do and move that onto the robotic platform, the opportunity for operational transformation starts to present itself, and it becomes much more realizable. The side benefit, of course, of any automation is the quality of that particular process improves because it's been automated. Robots don't make mistakes. They don't copy and paste into the wrong column. They only do what they're told to do. If they can't do it, they raise their hand up and they let you know. So the timeliness of processes, the quality of processes is improved just because you automated it. And the reason that we say this is it's not always about saving, time and money. That's not always the reason. Sometimes quality of process is important, especially where you're looking at compliance processes. It's not so much about how fast we do them, but they better be right, because people get in trouble when we don't, manage compliance processes properly. So quality of process is as important as, cost of process and speed of process. And then when we start to see these transformational changes taking place in an organization, we find that there are happier, more motivated staff. There's better retention. People don't experience burnout. They have time to add value to the businesses they work for instead of simply executing the business processes. So the motivation to take the repetitive robotic work away from people, give that to digital workforce and allow people to thrive in their environments is another good reason or a good use of digital workforce in the enterprise. And if anyone's got any questions or observations, do feel free to kind of air them. We can take them real time if people want to. So working for an RPA vendor, I work for Blue Prism. It's our job to provide digital workforce to our customers. We have this vision, and we see this transformation taking place, that the way in which work is done is changing. And I think we're all aware of this. You see it in the press. You probably see it in your own office, that things like artificial intelligence and machine learning is changing the way work gets done. And so Blue Prism has this view of the future that we're helping our customers work towards, which is to say that a third of the work that's done inside the organization, a third of the transactional work, will be done by core business systems. So things like core banking, ERP, enterprise budgeting and planning, CRM, those systems are going nowhere. They contain valuable business logic. They contain some automations of themselves, end of day clearing or reconciliation. And a third of the work will still be done by those core business systems. Another third of the work will be done by people that genuinely add value to those systems. So this is where you need a human response, you need empathy, you need out-of-the-box thinking, you need to think about the next version of the service or the next product offer or how you expand into a new market. These are all good problems for humans to work on because they require, human cognition. But then there's this other third of the work that really the worldwide is kind of untapped so far. There's this third of the work which is it's repetitive and it's rote in its nature, it's high in volume, and it's the same day after day after day. And actually, this is the work that can and should and will in the future be done by robots. And this really is what the digital workforce enables inside an organization. It fundamentally changes the way in which work gets done inside the business. And of course, that third of the work that's done by robots can be done at a far lower cost than the work that's done by people. So you need to work out, for any given business process, what's the lowest cost way of implementing that business process. And generally for the repetitive work, the answer is the robot is the cheapest way to implement that business process. And this, therefore, when presented to organizations, is changing the way organizations think about the way work, the way work is done. Now, nobody really is a third today. But people are getting there. So bit by bit, anyone that's running an automation program will know that their digital worker slice of that pie is increasing over time. And this is what I spend a lot of my time working with customers to do, to help them grow that slice of the pie. And so you do need to have a digital worker that meets or exceeds the human capability to do work. If the robot is not as good as the person doing the same job, you probably shouldn't have done it. That stands to reason. And it does need to be an enterprise grade system, right? Because if you believe that this is the future of the organization, and a third of the work is resting on the automation platform, that automation platform needs to be an enterprise grade platform. So you're talking high availability, no single point of failure, easy to scale, dynamic allocation of processes onto robots. All of these things are what your business now requires, because you made the big bet to automate those processes. And also the use of digital workers is probably the easiest way to democratize artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other technology. So there's lots of services out there right now with Microsoft, with Google, Amazon, web services, language translation, speech to text, text to speech, all these kinds of things. But how do you, as an individual, use them? It's actually very hard because they're web services. But guess what? robots or digital workers talk digital native to AI and to machine learning. So if you want to bring a machine learning system or a cognitive service directly into your business process, the robot is actually the easier way to do it. It's very hard to do it using a human workforce, but actually it's second nature for robots to talk to artificial intelligence systems and to get actionable insight from those AIs. So this is the way in which work itself is going to change. So Esmail said at the start, what is a robot? I think we all think when we hear robot, we think of something on caterpillar tracks with, 2 eyes and 2 arms, maybe carrying a tray of drinks or something like that. And that really isn't what is a robot in this sense. We're talking really here software robot. And a software robot is a piece of software, and it uses exactly the same applications that humans use today. And this is why RPA actually has a very low barrier to entry, because it doesn't require what you think of as classic system integration. It doesn't require you to patch or upgrade any of the existing business applications. The software robots basically install on a Windows 10 virtual machine in the data center, and they open and close applications exactly the same way that you do. So they open Excel, they open Outlook, they open Oracle, they open a web portal, they open Dynamics. They do what you do. They just need to be trained. What is it that you do? And so this is why there's a very low barrier to entry for robotics, and it's a very easy project to kickstart in an organization. So these robots also rely on humans. So a typical robot is going to raise what we either call a referral or an exception. A referral is when the business process has been specifically coded to ask the human, do you approve of this action? Do you approve of this refund? Do you approve of this risk level for this customer? Maybe you don't trust the robot to make that decision. Maybe you want to defer to the human. This is called a referral. But then sometimes the robot's going to try and do something. It's going to try and put something into core banking or open a web portal or send an email, and the email system is down, or core banking is unavailable, or some other thing obstructs the robot from doing its day job. Well, the robot could just crash and fail, or it could reach out and ask for help, and this is called an exception. So well-defined processes, when a robot hits an exception scenario that it can't handle, it's going to mail an administrator or a management team, hey, I need help with this. I can't progress with my business process. So this is why we say that actually robots don't replace humans. Humans are there to support robots, just in the same way that robots support humans in their day job. So robots and humans really must learn to work together in an operational sense. And then those robots also are able to use artificial intelligence, machine learning to augment their basic skills. An out-of-the-box robot is able to navigate business logic no problem, but sometimes native robots lack complex decision-making logic, whereas artificial intelligence systems have complex decision-making logic. They're augmented by optical character recognition, so I can work out what is this document, and also I can work out what is in this document in terms of the text, and also things like natural language processing skills. So if I want a robot to monitor an inbox and work out what is my customer asking me, well, I can use a natural language processing skill to infer what the customer is asking, and then I can act on that request. So robots are faster and more secure than humans. They run in the data center. They run behind the firewall. It's much better to have a robot behind the firewall process 1,000 bank statements on behalf of a customer, rather than that playing out on a person's desktop in an open office. This is how data gets lost. So it's faster and more secure to use robots in a secure environment. They do operate 24/7. So all of the processes that you automate, they never need to stop running. We don't need to wait for the next business day to start work. We can clear the backlog overnight because the robots are more than happy to pull the night shift. Robots are 100% accurate and don't make mistakes. So of course, if you badly program a robot, if you give it bad instructions, well, it will dutifully execute a bad program. But if we do a good job, if we design a process well, if we put it through user acceptance testing, if it meets our requirements, from that point on, robots aren't going to make mistakes. Humans make copy paste mistakes all the time. They send things to the wrong email address. They put the wrong decimal place in the number, which can cause a big problem, but robots don't do that. And then those robots are also enhanced by artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, as mentioned earlier. So in terms of the differentiators of a digital workforce, how is this any different really than just hiring a lot more people to do the same job? Well, the first thing is, robots are smart, and the number of add-ons and third-party systems that are being created to augment the basic skills of robot is increasing all the time. So all of the RPA vendors have like an app store for the robots. The one from Blue Prism is called Digital Exchange, and all of the third parties put connectors and adapters so that the digital workers can connect into these best-of-breed, third-party cognitive systems. So that means that the skills you get out of the box from a robot are pretty good, but you can actually extend these skills infinitely. So they can be trained to do any new task, whereas with a human workforce, you're generally limited to the skill set of that person, and training is actually quite a long-term process. Whereas with a robot, if we train a robot to do a particular process and we augment it with extra skills, I can now have 1,000 robots execute that process. I can't do quite the same with a human workforce. It's also a very successful IT initiative. So as I mentioned earlier, it's got one of the lowest barriers to entry, one of the lowest costs of operating for the positive ROI that it brings. So if I can get just 10 robots in my business running 50 business processes, maybe I can do that for around $200,000, but maybe I can save upwards of $1 million on the payroll in terms of the the manpower that could replace. So it's a very, very successful IT project if a successfully run digital transformation with automation is executed inside the organization. And also they're more secure. So robots log everything that they do. Every action that a robot takes, whether it opens, it closes, adds, deletes, or moves, every action is logged into the database of the automation platform, as well as being logged into the database of the business application. And that gives us what we call non-repudiation. So we don't argue about, did the human do this or did the robot do it? Who made the mistake? If the robot did it, the robot logged it. If the human did it, well, it will be in the business system with the human's login. So everything should be secured. All data at rest should be secured. All data in flight should be secured. Usernames and passwords for business systems don't need to appear in clear text. They can be stored in key vaults, and robots can retrieve those credentials from key vaults and dynamically access applications. So it really is a very, very secure way of running business processes. And then finally, you get this idea of scalability. So if you use the right platform for automation, you get this ability to define a process one time, but have as many robots as you want execute that process at any point, night or day. So this is incredibly powerful if you're thinking about going to market with a special offer, like a 0% balance transfer or, some kind of sign-up offer. Of course, you stimulate the market into applying for your service, and then you realize that there's not enough people in the contact center, to deal with the amount of interest that you've generated. Well, what better scenario than if you could ramp up the robots from, 2 to 20 temporarily to deal with the onboarding business process that you created, because you've created a demand in the market for your product or service. So it's very, very important with automation that you're not building an individual process on an individual bot for an individual task, because that isn't really scalable. That's a little bit monolithic almost. It's much better to have a library of business processes that can be run on any number of robots at any point of time completely dynamically, because now that digital workforce can react to your changing business environment. So those are the differentiators of digital workforce, as compared really to a human workforce. And then my last slide, just for this session, and I'll stop talking and hand it back to Esmail, is this idea of using the digital worker as the focal point for how work gets done. So when you're looking at an automation platform, you can view that automation platform as a business operating system. And onto that business operating system, you can take all of the subject matter expert that you have across all your different divisions, all your different line of business leaders, all of your process excellence, and you can move all of those processes onto the business operating system, which is the RPA platform. Once those processes are on the business operating system, any number of digital workers can now execute any of those processes at any point in time, be it triggered by a human, or be it a schedule, or be it by dynamically executing the business process. So we like to see the automation platform as a center point, and then the digital worker as the focal point for how work gets done. And this is the kind of the automation centricity that we try to build into the digital transformation projects. But those digital workers actually reach out and leverage other systems to get their work done. So some of the obvious ones down here, things like optical character recognition. If you want the digital worker to scan a document, well, you're going to need an OCR capability to do that. If you want a digital worker to understand what somebody is asking, you're going to need natural language processing to do that. If you want to understand if somebody's happy, sad, pleased, displeased, whatever, you're going to need sentiment analysis to do that. If you want to start scanning in objects, maybe someone's making an insurance claim and you need to know what they're making an insurance claim for. Well, if they send a picture and you can recognize the object in the picture, is it a car or an iPhone or jewelry or something like this, we can use entity recognition to work out what they're claiming for before the customer even tells you, what claim that they're trying to lodge. And then you've got things like big data and machine learning. So lots of organizations have built, in the last 5 to 10 years, these big data lakes, but how actionable is the data in the data lake? Well, it's not actionable at all unless there's somebody doing something with it. And so robots can interface with data lakes, can extract relevant data, and then actually can perform business actions on business systems with that data. And then finally, things like machine learning. If you want to do risk-adjusted models for something like KYC, or you want to do fraud analytics, did this customer legitimately make this spend on this credit card at this point in time? There are multiple data points that have to be cross-referenced to work out, was that potentially fraudulent? And actually machine learning models built into digital workers can help us do that. So that's all I'll say on kind of what is RPA and how we take this digital worker-centric view of the system. And then I'll hand back to Ismail.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that. Actually, looking back at these differentiators, I have all these words on my resume, so I might be a robot after all. I'm scalable, secure, and successful.
Absolutely. Well, it was Warren Buffett that said, if you want to increase your value, learn to do public speaking. So robots don't do public speaking yet.
So since we're at the topic, we have a question from Rami, I believe, from Tatweer Petroleum. He's asking, how much time does it usually take to set up a link between workflows and RPA compared to the traditional IT methods? Is it noticeably faster to deploy RPA workflows in terms of programming and in terms of deployment? We'd love to hear actually from Paul and also from the Mr. Muhammad and Mr. Hussein on their, I would say, real life experience.
Who do you want to go first?
Paul, since you're already unmuted.
Okay. All right. So my answer to that question is RPA is incredibly quick. In fact, it's sometimes so fast it's considered to be almost like a band-aid. People don't believe it can be that quick and be effective, but really it can. So with linking any two business systems together with robots and RPA, you're really just telling the robot which fields to click, where to get the data from, when to click next, when to click submit, and now those two systems are connected. But what we always advise that is, if you have two main business IT systems and you're doing huge amounts of data transfer between them, and it's only ever going to be in that direction, that way, you're actually much better taking the time, not using RPA to connect, A to B, but actually creating, a system to system integration. The disadvantage to that is once you've created that system integration, normally an SI has done it for you. It's kind of hard to change. It's hard to go back. It's not very flexible. There's very little administration around it, very little reporting about it. But boy, does it move data quickly between A and B. So there's always this trade-off between the time and money that you spend on, let's call it monolithic system integration, and the lack of flexibility you get at the end. But if you know that you're never going to have to change it, then it's probably worth building it that way. Whereas with RPA, what you're actually looking at is this idea of defining a process. And if you want the shortest path to defining that process, RPA is kind of the answer because it's a very, very quick system to deploy. But also you've got the flexibility to change it over time. If I need to connect to a different system or add an extra step in the workflow, it's actually very easy to do with RPA because of the visual design tools. So there is definitely two ways to provide this kind of integration, and it's about understanding how quick you want it and what the future holds for that integration, as which of those two techniques should you use to perform the integration.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Mr. Muhammad.
Thank you, Paul. This is, I think, answers Rami's question. However, if I may add, especially on, I think, in the industry, on the petroleum industry, and for example, in the banking sector, sometimes we face challenges with the traditional methods of integration, as mentioned by Paul. Legacy system cannot have direct integration between the systems, where we need to build this, let's say, human interaction between those two systems. So instead of a human doing this integration and moving the data between system to another system, it will be done by the RPA. So to answer the second question, is it noticeably fast? Yes, it is faster. Again, it depends on your system, and how the system are ready to integrate with other systems. So if it is not, if it is a legacy system, it cannot be integrated with other systems. RBA will be much faster because it is basically convert your process, whatever you are doing currently on this two system, to a robot which will do exactly what you are doing with it. So it is much faster.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed.
Yeah, Ismail, I would like to second what Mohammed had just said. Actually, when you go and see the speed of the bots, when, for example, when I firstly was introduced to the RPA 5-6 years ago, I was presented with a video, and I thought that video was fast forwarded with the action that bot took. But eventually, when I saw it in practice, it was very fast. The volume of tasks that the bot can do is massive. And as Mohammed also said, and Paul mentioned, maybe the main takeaway of what Paul mentioned in terms of the speed of deployment of the bots is that it doesn't require you to change anything in your application landscape. It can just sit on your application landscape, utilize exactly the system that you have, and basically move data and do actions based on what you require them to do. And this is why maybe RPA is picking up quickly, and it's replacing even traditional ways of integrations and basically linking systems together.
So they're quick, they're fast, they're secure, and easy to deploy. I think this is the gist of it. And thank you, Rami, for your participation and for your question. Now, also, we'd love to hear from the audience once more before we move to the next, I would say, to the next topic in our discussion. Now, since we're all hit by COVID and the pandemic, and we also we're on the end of our 5th lockdown, in your opinion, what do you think that was COVID-19 fostering the automation and RPA adoption, or was it a negative impact on the deployment and utilization of RPA? So we'll give it a minute so for everyone to fill out their answer. Mr. Mohammed and Mr. Hussein also would love to hear from your, I would say, also local experience and thoughts here. I mean, quite frankly, in any discipline, COVID did slow things down, but not just about RPA, but I believe we can all vouch to the fact that COVID helped us move in terms of digital transformation and in terms of automation quite faster. I mean, look at us today. We're 4 people. I would say we have attendees from possibly every continent. I've counted maybe 8 different countries. We're all on a digital platform. So I think overall COVID had a positive impact on pushing us towards fostering this automation and digital transformation. Don't you agree with me?
Indeed, Ismail. I think one of the one of the questions asked on the 2020, who's responsible for your digital transformation, or who is your head of digital information? The correct answer will be COVID-19, because basically it created the need. If you allow me to elaborate more on this, the main stopper for us not to go with RPA is the manual processes. If you have a process which is 100% manual, for example, on paper, on physical interactions, this kind of process yet it cannot be automated. However, I think there is a lot of methods now to even automate this manual procedure. What happens with COVID-19, it pushed us to convert all this manual processes and the processes we have to a digital platforms. For example, we used to have approval on payment on paper, on piece of sheet, where we need to take this paper and move it across all the heads or the people responsible to approve this transaction and sign on it physically, then it will be approved or it will be processed. Because of the COVID situation and all the lockdown, all the segregation, all the social distancing, all this precautionary measures has been taken in the working on the working place, it forced us and it helped the IT to convince the business users where they used to resist such kind of changes not to move to this digital. Sometimes their excuses is the audit requirement, the compliance requirement. Now with COVID, all this excuses has been removed. Now, after digitalizing this process, it is easy to add the RPA to it and automate it.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, I think we are all in agreement here that even with the audience that actually COVID-19 had a positive impact on or increased the adoption of RPA. Even statistically speaking, if you look at the numbers both regionally and globally, you'll see a sharp increase in RPA adoption across all industries, including banking and financial services. For example, now even in the insurance, now you'll log in online, you'll do the claims, you'll process any pending documents, you'll even upload your all your documents and identification. Everything is happening online. In the back end also, there is a lot of processing that was done manually, and due to COVID and I would say the social distancing measures and a couple of lockdowns that we have here and there, that have been also automated in the background. All right, that's great. Now we will move to the next section of our session today, and we would love to hear from now the local experience. So we know what RPA is. We have defined the digital workforce. Now we can recognize that COVID-19 basically gave us no other choice but to adopt automation and RPA. But how is it in Bahrain? Because it's important to know, I would say, the bigger picture, but also as residents and people who live in Bahrain and the region, we would love to hear from you, Mr. Hussein, about your experience at Solidarity, and Mr. Muhammad at your experience at BBK when it comes to RPA. So I'll pass it on you. Pass it to you, please. I'll just put the presentation. There you go, Mr. Hussein.
Thank you, Ismail. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you in NGN Majlis, and I would like to welcome the audience as well to today's session. And basically, I came, when it comes to RPA, I came to know about this technology around 4 to 5 years ago. From my days when I was working as a consultant in digital advisory. And to be honest, at that time, I noticed that the market in Bahrain was a bit shy to adopt such technology. And whenever we get into an engagement with our customers and we propose RPA as a solution to some of their challenges, we usually we usually face a hesitant client. They are not sure if this technology really would work. They ask a lot of, for example, questions about technology. They ask us to do a lot of POCs, a lot of pilots to be there. And eventually, once I moved to the insurance industry, and specifically in Solidarity, Solidarity, basically, they kicked off their digital transformation strategy back in 2017. And the focus was basically to digitize their especially customer fronting channels, like customer portal, like, for example, introducing video insurance, providing online payments, chatbots, etc. Now, with the pandemic hitting the kingdom in March 2020, we noticed a hike in online transactions. Our customers were able to basically perform their transactions online in a matter of minutes. and they were able to issue policies, they're able to renew their policies, register claims, process their claims. And this is not only limited to retail customers. It was also available to our partners, like, for example, brokers, representatives, showrooms, garages, and all kind of business partners. Now, naturally, when customers have access to all your services online, they can transact in a matter of minutes. They are expecting also that the entire service will be delivered in a matter of minutes, or maximum hours, or a day or two maximum. And that has created, I would say, an operational overload on our back offices to basically satisfy customer needs and requirements. And I'm sorry, do you see the slides advancing?
No, let me see, one sec. Can you try now, Mr. Hussein?
Just a second. Okay, yes.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, so basically, COVID has, I wouldn't say COVID started digital transformation in Bahrain. A lot of entities, they started offering online services maybe 4, 3, 5 years ago. But I would definitely say that COVID accelerated digital transformation in many sectors and in many industries here in Bahrain. Now, back to the challenge that we faced. As I mentioned, there was an overload on our back office operations to basically increase productivity, to basically reduce the turnaround time to service our customers. And when we were faced with this issue or this challenge, we thought about RPA as a technology to basically rescue us from this problem. And we actually started inviting vendors to explore what kind of solutions available, what kinds of tools is there, which processes can automate well. And we actually took a lot of time, a lot of POCs, a lot of pilots to understand the capabilities of RPA really well. And maybe one fundamental mistake that we have done at that time was that we gave those vendors the most complex process we have, which is basically the claim process. Claim process is very complex. It has a lot of parties involved, especially external parties. Those parties are a wide range of, I would say, entities that are well-versed technological-wise, and some are not. You're talking about advanced, maybe agents and showrooms, up to small garages in Bahrain. So the complexity was a bit high. Even the process itself was not standard. It varies from case to case. So a lot of those POCs, most of them failed at the beginning. So eventually, we concluded that the best way to deploy RPA is with processes that are a bit non-complex in nature, but repetitive and labor-intensive. And eventually, it should have a high impact on the organization in terms of productivity. So we considered activities or processes like, for example, statements reconciliation, like, for example, cash reconciliation, month-end closing activities, integrating two systems which are not API ready or legacy systems. And by doing that, we this enabled us to free resources and repurpose them into more, I would say, creative, challenging tasks, and enable them to utilize human talent. Talents like, for example, empathy, like dealing with customers, like decision-making. And that also led at the end to a better customer experience that reduced the customer friction within our organization. And this will finally lead me to the final section of my session, which is basically where do we see RPA heading in Bahrain? To be honest, I believe we are yet to utilize this technology to its full potential. However, I can see a lot of organizations in Bahrain, whether in the finance services, insurance, or even other sectors, they are starting to catch up with the RPA trend. And also, I can see that we are limiting implementation currently to robotic automation, while there are many areas where we can do cognitive automation as well. And eventually, we can reach a stage where we can also say that we have incorporated artificial intelligence within our organization. Of course, this comes with a learning curve. It comes with some effort to be put in from the organization, some investment. And maybe part of the responsibility also falls on organizations like NGN and Blue Prism to start educating the market about, okay, the different kind of automation, what kind of solutions over there, and where does it really can fit into each individual organization. I hope by this, Ismail, I have added value to the audience by stating our experience. And over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hussein. We appreciate, absolutely enriched the discussion, and I agree with you. I would say any initiative or any implementation, not just RPA, has a learning curve and an educational part of it. And thanks to you, Mr. Muhammad and Mr. Paul, as actually this is also the first step in the knowledge transfer and in the education. And this is why we started NGN Majlis, more of an awareness platform for us as participants also, and for the attendees who are requesting those topics. So thank you for enriching the discussion today. Mr. Muhammad, the floor handed over to you to hear more about your experience personally and at Bank of Bahrain and Kuwait.
Thank you. Thank you, Ismail.
Floor is
yes.
on.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you. I would like to thank NGN for having me today here to express my experience and talking about RPAs in banking sector. Of course, industry, the insurance sector and banking sector falling under same category from financial services point of view. So a lot of things has been already mentioned by Hussein, is absolutely correct. I will try. Yesterday, I thought how to illustrate the RBA and how can I link it to banking sector. So I thought about sharing it in a question forum where we will answer why, what, where, who, how, and when, and related to the RBA with the banking sector. So the first question I'll try to answer is, why do we need RBA in banking sector? Again, as mentioned by Paul and Hussein, we will focus on main advantages will be received when we adopt the RBA. First is reducing the cost, improving the efficiency, and increasing the productivity. This will lead to growth in our businesses. This applicable to all sectors. However, in banking sector specifically, those three factors are really our main focus when we are talking about the RBA here. So when we are able to provide a system which will help us to meet these three goals, I think this will help in improving the full overview business requirements. The second point related to the RBA and banking sector is what happened. What is the change has been done in our business model which led us to go for the RBA solutions? I think if I can summarize the changes on 5 points. First of all, the digitalization on the banking services. As we can see over the like 6 or 7 years, most of the banks are providing their services online, and we can in the last 3 years we can see in the region the new concept of the digital bank, full bank from A to Z, digitally available to service his customer. The second change has been happened to the market, the banking sector, is the 24/7 operations. Our customer nowadays are expecting the banking services to be available 24/7 during the holidays, during the weekends. Even our customers would love to open loans 24/7, transact 24/7, doing remittances, and the beneficiary will receive the amounts immediately in real-time services. This is another change happens to the market in the banking sector. The third point is the regulatory requirements. We saw locally in Bahrain and globally over the whole world, the regulatory requirement has been increased, where there is a huge demand on details requirement, which is very hard to be provided in short time, and to be provided with the details and huge accuracy, because the repetitive tasks usually creates a human mistakes. The fourth point is the compliance requirement as well. A lot of compliance work frames has been adopted by the banks. We saw a lot of security requirements adopted by the banks. A lot of work frames, a lot of certificates need to be acquired by the banks. So all this compliance requirement also changed over the 5 years period. The fifth point is the reporting requirement for our local or internal customers, which is the bank employees. We know that one of the things that humans good at is creativity. They tend to create a new idea. However, this new idea needs stats, need reports, need facts to be placed on. So providing repetitive reports for our internal customer and external customer, which is the internal employee and our customer, it become more an extensive task in the banking sector over the last 5 years. All these 5 points, we need to provide them with two main things. First, accuracy. We cannot, as mentioned by Paul, if you report a report to the regulator with the mistakes, this may lead either to the financial penalties or losing your license. It can reach to this level. So we need accuracy, and we need confidentiality, especially for the compliance and regulatory requirements. Again, usually we don't wish some cases, for example, let's say the court cases. This contains personal information. We don't want this to be exposed to the human, which we know everybody has a friend, which he may or may not share this confidential information with them. So we need to find a way to make this process first adapt with the surge on the volume and provide the level of confidence and confidentiality with it. The second point is here I will speak about some of the live use cases we have implemented in BBK, and some of the areas we are looking into it. We've been into RBA for a long time. However, recently we adapted some processes and tried to automate them. One of them is an example for the regulatory requirement, which is CBB block and block system, which is to update the customer information in relation to the court cases, which is a huge human-intensive task. We used to have people sitting full day just providing CBB with the block and block information, which is really hectic. The margin of error here, human margin of error, is really high. People can do mistake, and this is they're natural. We cannot stop human mistake. And however, if you do a mistake on this process, there will be a legal implication first on the person itself and on the bank on the other side. So the mistake is not acceptable, and it will have severe impact. The second process, which is as mentioned by Hussein, it was a bit complex process. However, it gave us the opportunity to see the power of RBA. I think the check validation required a lot of new modern digital interaction, like for example, the OCR part, the image recognition part, the signature validation part. These features are required huge interaction with the APIs of, for example, Google AI or Microsoft or AWS APIs for the image validation and image recognition. It was a complex process. However, it gave us the opportunity to see the power of RBA. Again, RBA can automate almost anything digital or anything you are doing on the computer. If I will put it in simple terms, whatever you are doing in your computer, it can be automated. Anything you do on daily basis, repetitive, it doesn't require you to think, you can automate it, as simple as it is. So loan processing is an area of automation. KYC, know your customer forms is the area of automation. Reconciliation is, again, a very human-intensive process, and it can be easily automated. Procurement and processing all the purchases through, and many more. The sky is not the limit for the automation on banking sector, and I believe on other sector. If we put these terms, anything you can do on your computer can be automated. The next question is, where shall we start? As mentioned by Hussein, again, we need to start with the quick wins to achieve two main goals. RBA is something new, and many of our management or business users are not aware of it, and they don't have the confidence, and we will face a huge user resistance. We faced a huge user resistance because when you come to any business user and you told them, like, can I automate your process? Whatever you do, I will help you on automating your process. The first question he will ask you, or she will ask you, are you planning to fire me? Am I losing my job? So you need to convince them the automation is not here to remove you or to make you redundant. The automation is to help you to do more creative tasks, more important tasks, more tasks will add value to you. So, for example, Mohammed Bouchiri, if I can automate 1 to 3 tasks of your day-to-day job, I will give you the time to do 4, 5, 6 tasks, which will add value to Mohammed Bouchiri as an employee in the organization, because 4, 5, 6 tasks, which I cannot automate, will make Mohammed Bouchiri more important to the organization. This is usually the method I can recommend for the IT or the owner of automation on the organization, how to sell and market the RBA within the organization. So if you choose a huge or let's say high intensive task in terms of human interaction and simple by its natural, we can automate it very fast. And if we automate very fast and we show the value of the automation, easily you can convince the management, and easily you can convince the employees of the organization that, see, this is the value we are bringing in. This is the first point where to start. The second point, the employee feedback. After you finish the first step, you will find the employees come to you and they will give you the recommendation on where to automate. They will give you, oh, thank you. You helped me with task number 1. Please help me with task number 2. I think the best person helps you with choosing the process to automate is the employee themselves, because they are the ones doing it. And again, this is a real example. One of the banks in the region, currently they have over 100 bots on their bank. And when I say 100 bot, it doesn't mean 100 process, because the bot can run multiple processes. So for example, I have a task, it's only available from 8 a.m. to, let's say, 3 p.m. the bot will work on this. However, after the working hours, I will configure the bot to work on another things. So this is the expected number of bots eventually medium to, let's say, small or medium-sized banks will have. Okay. The next point, who owned RBA in the bank? I believe the key factor or the key success factor for RBA to succeed on any organization and in any sector is the executive management, because they will provide the support for this idea, and they will bring everybody on the table to discuss and move this RBA in the correct direction. Again, we need the involvement from the employees. So we need them to own RBA. They need to be part of RBA to help us in choosing the critical task and the added value tasks when it's being automated. Again, if they are part of the RBA, they will help you and they will increase their productivity. Okay. I'm changing the size. Is it changing? Okay. Okay. How can we start now? Okay, we like RBA. We need to start RBA. What is my recommendation? How to start RBA? The first thing is to share the awareness with the stakeholders, the management, the top management, the executive management, the mid-layer management, and the employee. You need to make sure they know what we are talking about, okay? And you get their buy-in from the stakeholders. The second point is to select the automation platform. I recommend do a POCs, especially for people new to this area. POC will give you the real life, the real output of the bot. The good thing for POCs with RBAs is that we are not testing something POCs like it will be not let's say even 50% of the last product. The POC on the RBA is the real one. When you ask, for example, Blue Prism, since they are on this event, if you ask them for POC, the bot they will provide you for POC is the one you will use at the end of the day. So you will taste and feel and smell the real output of the RBA. Then you need to avail the team which will work and it will be their main responsibility to automate your organization. Some vendors call it Center of Excellency, where you need to create this. I will not say a unit; it can be spread across the IT and business teams. However, you need to create this unit and provide them with all the required skills and tools to automate. After that, you need to create the work frame and the procedure to automate and streamline the RBA process on the organization. Finally, when shall we start? This is my personal view. I think we need to start yesterday. The more you delay it, the more complex it will be. Because as mentioned by the team here, that it's not easy to automate complex procedure. And as we know, every day our processes and the procedures getting more complex because of the new requirements. So the earlier you adapt the RBA, the simpler the process will be, and it will be easy to automate. Then any new requirement, it can be easily integrated within the RBA process. This is my take. Thank you. This is to conclude. RBA is not here to replace people. RBA helps people not to be robots. This is my take on RBA. Thank you very much.
That's very well put, Mr. Muhammad. You are absolutely right. Basically, it gives us the room to be more creative. It helps the human get rid of the boring and mundane, repetitive work. And to sum up, I think I absolutely agree with you. You have to have a culture of accepting and fostering this solution and this technology. You have to make sure that you have an agent inside who is helping with the change, with the adoption, and definitely convey the message of and the value of such an initiative, whether it's RPA or any new technology. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing your experience along with Mr. Hussein. It's always nice to hear from the local experience. It adds, I would say, a connection between what's happening outside our borderlines and what's happening at home. So thank you for that. Now I will pass it on for our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Yaqub Al-Awadi. He will tell us a little bit about his point of view about the RPA adoption in Bahrain and how the ecosystem in Bahrain is ready and already fostering the concept of digital transformation and RPA. Thank you again. Thank you both so much. Mr. Yaqub, if you can just open your camera, we are eager to hear from you.
Can you hear me, Ismail?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Ismail?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everybody. I very much enjoyed Muhammad's session and Hussein, and before that, Paul. So I believe both the gentlemen, Muhammad and Hussein, summed it up. So I believe in Bahrain, like any other company, any other country, especially with COVID-19, people have high expectations when it comes to real time. So when they do their banking, they want everything real time, everything updated on spot, instantaneous. So the banks have this challenge, and I believe what Muhammad said about the robots. I firmly believe in that as well. I'm going to touch about the training part in that. Let's go, if you don't mind. So if you talk about Bahrain and the adaptation of RPA, if you look at Bahrain today, the stat shows us that almost the internet penetration is around 98%. Bahrain, according to the e-government index for United Nations, is showing that Bahrain is amongst the leading, in the ICT due to the advanced infrastructure. So the high internet penetration by itself tells you more about, the people connected online and their expectation for all their services, their I would say the companies they deal with, whether it's the banking community, whether it's the airline, whether the services industry. Their expectation is that everybody is online, everybody provides real-time services and real-time connectivity. Hence the need for the robotics or the RPA applications, as was mentioned. On the other hand, what makes it also more challenging is that we have a lot of IoT devices coming up, a lot of artificial intelligence built up in our networks. And the rest, as you can see, the cloud computing, the blockchain, the fintech, the e-wallets, and they are all interconnected. They're all integrated together, which makes it a perfect environment to have RPA to activate services, to enable them real-time, 24/7. So people have no more patience to wait. I think the example of banking, which was perfectly put by Muhammad, today people don't like to go to the banks physically. I don't know. Let's ask ourselves, when was the last time we physically went to the bank? And especially with mobile wallets, nowadays we don't even go to the ATM. I don't remember when was the last time I physically, visited the ATM to draw cash. If you look at our wallets today, I don't think you'd have the number of bills, the notes that you have in the past. And I always bring the example of the wallets today did a great job for us. We used to have these coins, bits lying everywhere at home in the cars, but today we don't have this anymore thanks to technology. Even the healthcare is no exception. Industry in particular, again, is no exception. So the industries are no exception to all the robotics or the advanced technology in those areas. So if you look at the innovative, I would say, ecosystem in Bahrain and the technologies in, because of the advanced infrastructure, because of the high internet technology, things have moved faster. If you look at the digital transformation that has happened as a result of COVID-19, Bahrain managed to swiftly adapt the technologies, move into whether it was e-learning, the technology, whether working from home. It was so fast, not only from a technology perspective, but only the people themselves. So the culture, the people themselves easily adapted because they use technology day to day. So that was an amazing part. So if you talk about RPA in the banking, I think enough examples were brought, but recently there was a CBB competition. Again, the competition was about account blocking and unblocking automation process. So this process, there used to be a tedious process, a time-consuming process. With RPA, this is now done real-time, instantaneous. There are other applications like audits, annual audits for banks, for insurance, for other, I would say, industries. Today, these processes that used to take days and weeks and months can be done instantaneously in probably hours and less than that. And similarly with obviously the training. Now, when we talk about, I think Muhammad perfectly said that about the robots and the human interaction. So what will happen to people who are doing these routine jobs today? The routine jobs are, I would say, a perfect fit for RPA and robotics. However, people need to increase their skill set, move on, to move on higher to the value chain and get more creative, get technologies, whether it's with cyber, whether it's with artificial intelligence, whether it's areas of data science, where people learn more creative, I would say, skill sets that they can apply. There are still areas where humans can add great value, and especially where areas that, if you talk about NGN, and you all know that NGN has cybersecurity and artificial intelligence part of our core network and our core business direction, and RPA as well. So these are the creative areas. These are the areas that I would say the future generation or the near-come generation as well to focus on. And the fear of robots replacing people, I think this is not a realistic fear, in my opinion. The fear is when people don't change. We see a lot of change happening around us, whether it's locally, regionally, globally. So the constant is the change, and the people who embrace change, people who proactively look at things to improve their skill set, are the people who succeed in future. Where people who stay in their comfort zone, I think they will have a tough challenge. Thank you very much. I think enough has been said from our expertise. I'd like to thank everybody from our expertise from the panel. I had a wonderful time with all of you, and I think beautiful examples were set. I have a couple of things just to mention as a closer. One is the industries. We've not seen much on the industry use of RPA. That's a green field, and that's an area that we should see more of RPA in, and we would love to be part of that. I believe the banking is doing a great job, fantastic job, and the insurance, no doubt about that. But there are many other areas that I'm sure have the aspiration to do it. I thank you all for investing time with us. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Mr. Yaqub. Thank you for that. And definitely, I agree with you. Bahrain has actually always fostered innovation. I mean, how many countries can say that they have public incubators that support local fintechs and IT startups, not only financially, but also in terms of training, office space, labs. I think this is something we should all be very proud to be a part of. Thank you. Now we'll move to, briefly, definitely we can't cover RPA from A to Z, but as promised, we want to tackle the topic of where to start. So now we know what RPA is. We heard about the local experience in Bahrain from the banking and financial aspect. We are, I would say, positive and sure that Bahrain's ecosystem supports automation and RPA and innovation. The question begs itself, where do we begin? And this is where Mr. Poe is going to give us a little bit of insight. how to start that initiative of RPA and a digital workforce.
Yeah, thank you. Are you doing a survey?
By the way, yes, you can definitely start, but we'd love to hear a little bit from the audience. Now, since we're going to identify how to begin, in your opinion, what's the biggest obstacle or limitation that is hindering or stopping the implementation of RPA? Is it the cost factor? Is it the expertise and resources? Or I would say we're not sure where to start. There's definitely no right and wrong answer, but just it's a bit about having that interaction. Would love to hear from you. Are you, Paul, are you going to prove that it's none of the above?
Or none of the above? I think the other one that's maybe missing from the poll there is the kind of the executive sponsorship, right? So expertise is a thing, cost is a thing, but sometimes you just lack executive sponsorship to make a difference. And the first thing I said today was about, vision, and it was said as well by Mohammed, like you need sponsorship to run these programs. And if there's no sponsorship, it's very difficult to make a change within an organization.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that was covered by Mr. Hussein and Mr. Muhammad. Basically, you need to have the executive level of support. You need to have that culture that fosters and promotes this. So thank you everyone. I'm glad I would say that you are setting us up to the next topic. So exactly, we're not sure where to start, and I think this is a common issue faced by many organizations. So, Paul, would love to hear from you, your recommendations, and basically where to begin. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'll open my presentation, and I'll just ask as well, how long do we have time-wise? It's coming up for the 1/2 hour.
The event is scheduled to end at 12:45, so we'll give I would say 5 minutes for a couple of Q&As towards the end. So you have all of 10 minutes.
Okay, so normally I would spend a long time talking about how to do this, but I'm going to give you the 10-minute version then of how to get started with automation. So the first thing to realize is that when you're running an automation project, generally the automation that you're doing, it comes in 3 waves of sophistication. And if you're doing this internally now, you can mark your own homework on where you think you are on this. So the first thing is this wave 1 of efficiency and productivity. And here what you're doing is you're taking the business processes you have today and you're just transposing them onto the robot. So, what my people do today, my robots do tomorrow. And that's absolutely fine. You get all of the benefits that we talked about earlier on, the accuracy, the speed, the 24/7, the lower cost of operation. All of that comes kind of free of charge when you do efficiency and productivity automation. And there's a lot of processes in any organization where you can transpose them kind of directly from human to robotic. And that's where most people start. Now, the next wave of automation is when you start to look at business performance. So rather than just saying, what is the process I do and can the robot do it? You ask a slightly different question. You say, what are the KPIs that drives this particular business unit? How do I measure my business unit? And therefore, what can I do with automation that improves those KPIs? And that's not such an obvious answer, because it could be things like I'm measured on customer satisfaction. I'm measured on net promoter score. I'm measured on retention. I'm measured on upsell or cross-sell. I'm measured on timeliness of execution, these types of things. So here, it's not so much a case of what is the business process and can I automate it? It's which set of solutions and technologies do I need to do to move the needle on the KPI as I measure it for my business unit. And very often what we see is that we move from just RPA here into IPA, into intelligent process automation. And we start to need additional technologies, maybe things like machine learning or decision engines, OCR engines, translation engines, things like this. This is where we start to look at business performance processes. And then the third wave there is like business transformation. And when you're actually doing business transformation on one or more lines of business, you're actually fundamentally asking yourself, does this need to be done the way that we've historically done it? Do I need to have teams or groups of people with software licenses and terminal services and all these kinds of things to run this business function? Do I even need that anymore? And I think it was mentioned earlier on that, for example, something like check clearing was historically a case of manual inspection of check and validation, and then updating the core system with the fact that the check is good to honor. but actually computers can do that entirely automatically now with numeric validation, ink type validation, measuring the signature against the authorized signature specimen. So that manual business that was based on human inspection of documents effectively actually can be an entirely digitally driven enterprise. It just doesn't need people to do it, apart from the smallest of exceptions. And so you can really transform the way in which certain types of business units work. Another good example would be the insurance business, where there are companies now that are doing entirely online provisioning of policies, online settlement of claims instantaneously using chatbots, robots, and core business systems. They've disaggregated the need for people to really play a role in most of those business processes. So that's kind of business transformation when you get to the top. Now, why do we say it like this? Because nobody is going to start an automation program by mastering business transformation if you didn't at least build a core competency to do efficiency and productivity. So everybody starts somewhere, and it's important to learn to walk before you run. And then in terms of what that takes to make it successful inside the business, and this is it's got nothing to do with technology. Blue Prism as an organization has 20 years now of running these kinds of transformations in customers. And we had to learn in the beginning. We have seen what is good and we've seen what's bad. And we've kind of distilled that into a kind of recipe for success. So everything that you do is some combination. Your operating model is some combination of the technology you have, the people that you have that use the technology, and the processes that the people drive that is on the technology. And this is the same for any business all over the world. Now, there is this kind of fourth dimension to that now, which is not just the people doing the work, but the robots doing the work as well. And so the challenge that you have is to kind of integrate that digital workforce into your target operating model. And if you've never done this before, that's not an easy thing to do. And so Blue Prism works with its customers really on operating models, right? And so we have this operating model that starts to lay out the foundation about how you begin and sustain and progress the digital transformation using automation in the business. And I would argue all of these pillars that we use, they're vital. I think every organization does them to some degree, but the question is how good do you do them? And the better that you do them, the more successful your automation program is. So if we look at the pillars that we have there, the first thing, and we've heard it several times today, and we'll continue to talk about it, is this idea of vision. If you don't have a vision for where your transformation is going, you will never get to the end. And vision does not equal automating the general ledger, or vision does not equal automating invoice processing. That's not vision, that's task-based solving. So you have to have a vision that goes beyond the obvious problem in front of you into what does my business look like in 2 years, in 3 years, if I run this program meaningfully? What does that mean? And if you go back to my original slide at the beginning, my vision is I want a third of the work in this business to be done right by robots in the next 36 months. Right, that's a vision that you can get behind, and there's lots of reasons why you would establish that. The other reason to have vision is to make it important. Okay, so if you think too small, you don't get people's attention. By the same token, if you think too big, too quick, too soon, you get launch failure and you don't accomplish your goals. So you've got to right size your vision, something that's big enough to make people pay attention, but small enough and concise enough that you can actually deliver it within a sensible time frame. So vision is very important. Organization, this idea of harmonizing your internal competence center for automation with the natural DNA of your business. So if you're, perhaps a bank, you're probably quite a centralized organization. You've got good top-down control of all of your functions, and you can afford to perhaps have a single center of excellence where all of your knowledge exists inside the business. That's probably going to work for you. If you're a very large federated organization, if you take something like Saudi Aramco, something like this, many divisions, different verticals, different functions, the cutting edge of technology, but still engaged in the age-old business of extracting and processing oil. It's very hard to impose a kind of top-down single department control over all of those different business functions. And so you have to think, well, in this case, this transformation is going to have a federated element to its nature. So whether you're centralized, whether you're divisional, or whether you're federated as a business, your competence of automation has to honor the internal culture and DNA of how your business works if it's going to succeed. Otherwise, it comes into conflict and then it doesn't work. Then we've got this idea of governance and pipeline. So governance and pipeline, before you spend any money on anything, you should be asking some questions. What can I automate? When do I automate it? What do I get back if I do automate it? How do I prioritize that against all the other things that I could be automating but perhaps choose not to automate? What's the time scale that I'm going to automate over, and what's the return on that investment? So this is the idea of constructing a pipeline of your automation potential, which goes in any organization, it goes beyond the first 5 processes. You should be looking at 50 to 100 processes in the analysis. Now, it may be that you don't do all that in the first project, but you should certainly know what's coming in the future, because this is the raw material that fuels the investment in your automation program, by knowing what comes next. This is a big problem. If customers don't know what comes next in terms of what they're automating, they run out of the evidence, to provide to senior management to say this is worth funding, this is going places. So very important to do governance and pipeline. Then you've got the delivery methodology. So how are you actually going to build your automations? And the idea really shouldn't be to give the bot design software to every person in the company and see what good idea they came up with. I mean, that's kind of a chaotic development methodology. So you must have some structure and some governance around how you build your automations, how you complete the documentation, what does UAT look like, what does production look like, what are the quality gates that we go through. All of that's really important. Why? Because when you build some of these automations, they can last for years. They can be in place for 5, 10 years or longer. In fact, I don't think we know how long some of these automations will last for, because we're still at the start of the business. But we can imagine these automations a bit like mainframes in a way, just existing for decades, because people build them, they work, and they get left to run. So having good documentation and robust standards around delivery, very important. I mentioned earlier on that robots work with humans. So once these robots go live and once they're doing work, the business can't assume that the IT team is now picking up the bill and looking after the business process. The IT team provides the technology that enables the business to use the robots, but the business owns the business process. And so when these robots or when these processes enter a scenario I mentioned earlier on, an exception or a referral where they need help from people, what does that team look like that's going to be there to help the robots when they need the intervention? Okay, so what we can't do is we can't fire and forget. We can't just build a robot and then forget it exists. Okay, it's doing work for us. We need to help the robot when the robot needs help. And by the way, if your business process changes or there's some change in a core business application, somebody's going to have to update the process to account for the change in the business process or the change in the application. So that whole service model around how you work with live robots is as important as how you build them, is as important as what are you going to build. Okay, so it's a closed loop of management. And then you've got the people skills. You're bringing in a new capability to the organization. How are you going to skill people up? Who are going to be my developers? Who are going to be my process controllers? I have a head of HR. Maybe I should have a head of robotics or a head of RPA. After all, robots do work in the business. So we do need to start to think about the skills development, the training plans, and making sure that we've got excellence within the within the people side of the business in order to make the automation program work. And then finally, we are talking technology here. We are talking digital transformation. This thing has to be high available, disaster recovery. The security team are going to ask me, have you really got access to my core banking application? Show me that the credentials are safe. Show me that data is encrypted. Show me that data in transit is encrypted. Show me that the robots log everything that they do in a database so I can check who did what, where, when, how, and why. Technology does matter here as well, but so do the soft processes that go around it. So all of those disciplines, all of those 7 pillars, you've got to get them right. You don't have to build them all to 100% on day one, but you have to have a plan for them, and you have to scale them up as you scale up your automation project. Now, all of those disciplines, they all feed into the center of excellence, and the center of excellence inside the business creates the demand within the business for automation by advertising the capability, taking that demand, prioritizing that demand, and then delivering back to the whole of business the business benefits through a proven, demonstrable return on investment. So we should never be automating any process where we can't show that the automation dollar that's being spent is cost positive in the long run. This is where the prioritization comes in. So what you do and how you do it is probably more important than what is the technology on which you do it. You can give the best tools to an inexperienced person and still get a negative result. So very, very important to build the disciplines around how to use the best tools. And then just in the bottom left there, we can see that just last year there was a survey done in KSA by IDC, just to talk to customers that were automating, but asking them, like, how are they automating? And only 26%, so 1/4 of everybody that was automating, said they had this well-established center of excellence. So what that suggests to me is that 75%, 3/4 of all the customers that were engaged in some kind of automation, didn't feel they had a functioning center of excellence to act as a flywheel in their automation project. What that probably tells me is that some of these customers may have been automating for 2 or 3 years and maybe only had 5 processes to show for it. Whereas the reality is after 2 to 3 years of automating, you should be looking at 50 plus processes automated easily if you build a system like this and if you stick to it. So I'll mention very quickly how we help customers go through adoption curves like this. We always start with this initialize phase where we establish capability. Everyone starts somewhere. You have to start in a single line of business. You choose 5 or maybe 10 processes, something like this, and you start your project. And this is a project within a program, okay, because the project is not the end. We make sure that we have vision. We make sure that we're thinking about our target operating model. We establish our governance board for which thing do we automate and does it make sense. We start to think in terms of standardized process and procedure for how we go about our automation. We build a measure to our KPIs. So any process that we automate, that it should be measurable in its own right, and we should be able to show that, you know, a KPI has been affected by virtue of our automation. And we start to invest as well in the internal capability and make sure that we have the right people. Often internal staff shadowing external implementers is the way that this begins, and we start to build out the delivery methodology and deliver those initial processes and benefits. And maybe that phase is something like 3 to 6 months, probably 6 months from inception to conclusion. I've built my first 5 processes, they're up and running, and I'm happy with the result that I saw. After that, you enter what we call the industrialized phase. So when you're industrializing, you replicate and ramp up what you successfully did in, let's say, the finance department, and maybe you take it into HR, or maybe you take it into compliance, or maybe you take it into customer management. So you start to proactively seek out the additional processes and put them into the process backlog, into that governance and pipeline, and you continue to automate them. You make sure that what you're automating is actually aligned to the strategic goals of the organization. I mean, this is how you make sure that you're relevant to what the business is doing. It's no good automating a process that somebody asked for if it doesn't materially change the way in which the business is functioning, or improve a KPI or add value to a strategic goal. We have to showcase internally that this worked in this department and it can work for you. We heard earlier on the cultural barrier. When you tell people we're looking to automate, and the robots are coming, people worry for their jobs. But actually, there's a way to include those people in your process. Very often, they are the subject matter experts. So we have to showcase the capability and tell people, hey, you can be part of this. Maybe there's even a new role for you if you're sufficiently interested in it. And we make sure that we're tracking the benefit realization as well. So we always have to be prepared to show back to the business, we spent this much money on our automations, but we've delivered this many hours of work back to the business, or we've saved this many dollars, or whatever the KPIs are that we use to do benefits realization. And then finally, we get to this point of institutionalize. When we're institutionalized, senior managers, CIO and CEO and COO of the organization fully understand that this business now is kind of run by robots. It's supported by robots, and the robots add value to the business. And if there's a new initiative or a new program, or we're looking to do an expansion, the first thing they should say is, can the robots help us do this at a lower cost model than if we got people to do it and we just throw payroll at it instead of using the robots. And it takes a while to get to institutionalize. It takes a while for ideas like this to change the way that people think about the way in which they do work. But that really is your long-term goal and your vision for running an automation program, to get to this stage of institutionalization of robotics in the business, in the same way that networks and laptops and Windows and all these other ubiquitous technologies are institutionalized in our operations. Robotics should become institutionalized in our operations. And just a final slide, because I realize that we're coming towards the end of the time. What can you do and where? Pretty much you can do anything in any industry, in any line of business. I've not come across a process where really robotics can't help in some meaningful way automate that process. So if you look at contact center transformation, we can give intelligent e-forms to the agents so that they can rapidly collect data from customers and have robots perform tasks in the background, such as replacing debit cards or checking bank balances, or freezing accounts or unfreezing accounts. We can enable the contact center agents to do that. If we look at financial services, we can use robots to do end-to-end KYC, enhanced due diligence and ongoing due diligence. We can use robots to support anti-money laundering activity, so we can clear down the 90% of false positives that you get from systems like Furcosoft. They generate huge amounts of potential hits. Robots can get rid of those by cross-referencing automatically with the bank's internal data. Payment sanction screening, checking against things like WorldCheck or OFAC lists, adverse news screening using Google or other government-supplied lists. We can automate all of that. HR, we can do, for example, in healthcare, we can do credential management. We can put visiting physicians on payrolls very, very quickly, using spreadsheets to update payroll dynamically. We can get robots to do that. If we look in health and pharma, one of the big ones I'm asked about in pharmaceuticals and healthcare is revenue cycle management. We work in it. We live in an insurance-based healthcare regime in this part of the world, and the money coming back into the hospital as quick as it can is really, really important. That's a very, very laborious process for agents to fill in insurance claims and post them into the portal and then fix the mistakes, and then the money doesn't come in quick enough. We've got robots fully automating this process for some of our clients in the region. Fully automated revenue cycle management, fully automated table of benefits updates. So connecting into the insurance portals, collecting the latest the latest benefits entitlement for the policy, and updating the healthcare providers' local HIS system with those entitlements so that they always know exactly what the patient's entitled to on a dynamic basis. So there's no end of applicability to what you can automate using robots and using the cognitive services in the context of intelligent process automation. So that's all I'll say on that. Back to you, Ismail.
Thank you so much. That's, I would say, excellent way of presenting it. So we answered the question where to begin. Just to sum up what we've heard throughout the discussion, also from our local panelists, I think the heart of it, RPA, robotic process automation, there is the process, right? And as, for example, when Mr. Hussein presented his local experience, he clearly mentioned not just RPA in general, but he identified, for instance, claims. And I think that this is the right approach. You identify the process that is best candidate for automation. You foster the idea internally, whether it's with the executive management or whether it's with the end users. And then ultimately, you have the internal knowledge transfer, the education, the training, in order to be able to fully utilize the benefits and the ROI of RPA. I would like to give a few minutes for the audience. If you have any questions for Mr. Hussein, for Mr. Paul, we'd love to hear from you. And Mr. Hussein, if you would like to add any final talking points while we get the Q&A going, would love to hear from you too.
Yeah, sure, Ismail, and thanks, Paul, for the, I mean, you've covered almost everything, and you've covered really the key aspects of what to do or where to start or what types of RPA basically fits different type of industrial organizations. Now, maybe the final takeaway I would like to maybe share with our audience here is that RPA, I think, is something that is that will happen definitely in any industry. It's just a matter of when to start, and I think now is the right time. Definitely, as Paul mentioned, it has to be within a vision. It has to complement your digital transformation strategy. You need to first assess the business impact, of course, on your organization. You need to show the ROIs to your executive and management to basically get the buy-in. And at maybe the last thing that you need to consider is the processes that you'd like to automate. If you are trying to automate, for example, broken processes, automation definitely will not fix that. You need to basically select the processes that will suit the automation or the RPA capabilities.
That's absolutely right. Yes, it's always the process at the heart. I believe that hopefully we've covered all the topics, all the questions that the audience had, and we've clarified, we shed a bit of light on the discussion today. If you would like to have, I would say, a follow-up session or any demonstrations on the topic, we'd be more than happy to do so. You can definitely get in touch with myself directly. You can follow our NGN's page on LinkedIn to make sure that you don't miss our next NGN Majlis. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Hussein. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Bachiri and Mr. Yaqub, and definitely the attendees for making it an interactive session. and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you. Been lovely to spend the afternoon with you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you, Smile. It's a pleasure to be here.
Take care. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.